All right, awesome. Good evening, everyone. My name's Camden Sisler, and I'm going to be your moderator for today's event, Stepping Out of Stereotypes, How to Discover Your True Passions. Join us today as we hear personal stories from our panelists around the importance of stepping out of stereotypes, not letting other people's passions or paths influence yours. The goal today is to learn how to create your path based on what you are passionate about. Today, I'm super excited to introduce Claire Powell and Paul Polizzotto.
Thanks for having us, Cam. I'm Paul Pulizzotto. I am the founder and CEO of GiveWith and have spent the last 33 years as a serial social entrepreneur. So I've spent my entire career creating businesses and business models that improve the environment, health, and education around the world. And that was long before they even called it social entrepreneurship or social enterprise. I don't know when those phrases were coined. We just set out to create businesses to solve problems that we felt needed to be solved. So great to be here today. Thanks for having me.
Hi, my name's Claire. I'm a second-year mechanical engineering major at Illinois Tech. I'm also a master's in technological entrepreneurship. So I also have a passion for entrepreneurship. So I'm really excited to speak today.
Terrific. Well, thank you, Claire, and thank you, Camden, again for having me today. But as I mentioned, 33 years as a serial social entrepreneur, and my interest in social entrepreneurship started quite personally. I had a very personal connection and reason for birthing my first social enterprise. I grew up in Southern California in a little beach town called Manhattan Beach. It's a little beach town in Los Angeles. And I grew up as a competitive surfer. I stayed amateur, but most of my friends went on and became professional surfers. And we grew up with this very healthy sport of surfing, but we were sick all the time. In the 70s and 80s, Santa Monica Bay, which is the bay that is the entire coastline of Los Angeles, was quite polluted. And so here we were involved in this very healthy sport of surfing, but we were sick all the time, having upper respiratory issues, ear infections. And during times of rain events, sometimes people even had to go in and have gamma globin shots for fear of hepatitis. So when it would rain and the entire LA basin would drain into Santa Monica Bay, it was like a toxic stew. And so I was really curious as to what activities were going on in the LA basin that were contributing to the stormwater and urban runoff pollution that was making us sick. And what I found was that there were contractors that were cleaning industrial sites and manufacturing facilities, parking lots, and even bio-infectious waste areas at hospitals and washing the pollutants right into the storm drain system and right into the bay. Now, the way the Los Angeles is set up is that sewer systems and storm drain systems are separate. So anything that goes into a storm drain catch basin is going to go straight to the bay with no treatment. And so I wanted to make sure that those pollutants wouldn't find their way to the bay. And I saw that contractors were doing that illegally. And I thought, if I could create a compliant way to do those types of activities and contain and dispose of the pollutants in a compliant way, I could legalize and legitimize an industry. And I pioneered something called urban watershed cleaning and a process called zero discharge. I was 25 years old when I started that business. And so I pioneered those methods and legitimized and legalized an industry. And it became a new standard where it was either get legal or get out. If you were going to do those types of activities in a way that was going to pollute the environment and break the law, there was no room for you anymore. And so I set new standards and ultimately legalized and legitimized an industry. I won an award from the United States Environmental Protection Agency for the creation of those methods, and my first company took off. I ended up having all the large high-rise buildings of Los Angeles and hospitals and industrial sites and parking facilities, and I'm quite proud of that work. That business still exists today, but while I was growing that business, I became increasingly immersed in the environmental community and began to work with governors around the country, mayors, county boards of supervisors, and nonprofits. And I started being exposed to really amazing, worthwhile projects. projects where cities, counties, states, and nonprofits brought a lot of the money together for these projects, but not all the money. And they needed some gap financing to get fully funded and off the shelf and into the community. And that's where the passion for my second enterprise began. And that was to bring funding to these very worthwhile and meaningful projects that were stuck and get them off the shelf and into the community. The way I wanted to do that was at first to start a nonprofit. I wanted to start a nonprofit to win grants, to fill the gaps, to get the projects done. But what I found was that when I started winning grants and I started filling gaps, that I was taking a grant out of an existing grant pie, meaning that that grant was going to go to another nonprofit had it not gone to me. So it was like a zero-sum game. I wasn't doing anything additive. And what made matters worse was that my friends were the executive directors of these nonprofits. They said, Paul, we think what you're doing is super cool, but you're taking our grants now. You're competing for our grants, which was not my intention. And that's when I had an idea for my second enterprise. And it was to bring an entirely new funding stream to nonprofits that had nothing to do with charity or philanthropy. I didn't want to compete with those existing charity. I wanted individuals or corporations that were going to give money to nonprofits to keep doing that. I wanted to create a new funding stream for nonprofits by leveraging business activities. And that was the passion for my second enterprise. And what I saw was that the process of selling was enormously expensive. I'm talking about big sellers. I'm talking about leveraging business to business transactions and business to government transactions as a way to deliver greater value to suppliers and buyers and create an entirely new funding stream for nonprofits, leveraging the power of transactions. I wanted to leverage the most fundamental activity of commerce, the transfer of goods and services for value as an agent for positive social change. The industry that I first applied that to was the industry of advertising and media. And the reason I did that was that I saw that the advertising and media industry was becoming increasingly fragmented and commoditized. And I wanted to show one big seller or one big broadcaster that they could apply social impacts as a sales incentive. So when I looked at the process of selling for big sellers, the Fortune 500 spends 25% of gross revenues on SG&A, sales and sales related expenses. Some of these corporations are spending 8, 9, 10, 11% just on advertising. So I looked at what big sellers were spending to attract and retain clients, right? Client acquisition costs. And I looked at advertising, marketing, PR, corporate communications, events, conferences, white papers, and then all the other things that sellers use, like volume discounts and rebates and extended warranties and so on, and said, you sellers are missing a tool, social impacts as a sales incentive used as a tool, a sales tool, to attract more new customers, retain customers better, and have a better return on investment on those existing client acquisition costs. As I said, the first industry I applied that to was the industry of advertising, wanting to show one advertiser or one media company that they could outperform others by applying social impacts as a sales incentive. I entered into a joint venture with the CBS Corporation in 2008 and 2009 to show them how they could use social impacts as a sales incentive to shift business away from ABC, NBC, and Fox to CBS. And we used that shift to fund a green schools initiative all over the country. And Chicago was one of the cities that we did it in, with WBBM there in Chicago. So we used the shift of advertising spend to CBS to underwrite solar panels at schools and energy efficiency retrofits and plant organic gardens and teach kids how to grow their own food and cook their own food. We attached STEM education to the solar installations so that students could do science projects and energy forecasting as to why the solar panels took on more energy in May instead of December. We used the sale of a commodity, a 30 to fund solar panels on libraries, parks, and city halls. The City Hall of Miami became the first big city hall to be powered by renewable energy, and it was all underwritten through leveraging B2B transactions. There were no taxpayer dollars whatsoever in that project. That joint venture won the 2009 Award of Excellence from the U.S. Conference of Mayors and became the #1 public-private partnership in the nation. CBS went on to purchase my company. They purchased it in 2010. We went on to use social impacts as a sales incentive to shift hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars of advertising over to CBS. And we directed more than $100 million of new funding and resources to nonprofits and positively impacted the lives of more than 60 million people just by leveraging B2B transactions between large sellers and large buyers. GiveWith, that, so my company, Ecomedia, that was purchased by CBS, was a one-to-one situation where I helped one seller, CBS, in one industry called advertising, use social impacts as a sales incentive to generate greater value for the seller, the buyer, and society. GiveWith is an opportunity to do that for all sellers, all buyers, and to open up the floodgates and help suppliers and buyers doing large business-to-business and business-to-government transactions to create more value for the supplier, the buyer, the seller, the buyer, and create an entirely new funding stream for taking on the most pressing issues of our time: climate change, diversity, equity, inclusion, social justice, hunger, poverty, and the list goes on. And unfortunately, as a result of COVID and a number of the other issues we face, we have a growing list of global challenges that need urgent attention. So I will leave it there. Thank you very much again for having me, and I look forward to answering questions as we move forward.
Paul, thank you very much for taking the time to share your incredible story. Now we're going to go ahead and hear Claire Powell speak. I'm just going to go ahead and share her slides, and then she's going to get started.
That was so inspirational, Paul. Like, that's such a great story.
Thank you, Claire. Appreciate it. Appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Alrighty, so I'm going to discuss more about how to discover your true passion, and I hope by the end of this little presentation that'll at least help you find a direction and give you a path to hopefully finding your passion. So if you want to go to the next slide. So the agenda for today is I'm going to give some quick tips and general advice. Then we're going to go into an interactive question portion that we're going to do a couple questions, hopefully help you find your passion. Then I'll be ending by going over some common issues that you might face when trying to pursue your passion and how to overcome them. All right, so the quick tips. I just want to start out by saying that a passion doesn't have to be your career or a hobby. It could be a feeling, or it can be an emotion, and it can be like a component of something you do, like leadership or organization. So I just want to like break that stereotype, because maybe you think it's going to be this huge, really well-defined thing. It could just be something like leadership. I also want to let you guys know that it's totally cool if your passions change as you grow and become a different person as you get older. So say like right now you're really focused on teamwork, but maybe 30 years down the line, you really want to develop your leadership and you're really passionate about being a leader. That's totally okay. But the thing is, you have to give yourself time to realize those change in passions. So my first nugget of advice is making your time so you guys can think about your passions and to assess where you're at. I know as students, we totally overwhelm ourselves with school, student orgs, extracurriculars, jobs, sports, and we literally don't give ourselves time to just sit down and think. So I think it's really crucial to just have that downtime where you can just ponder what you're doing, think about why you're doing it, and what actually like makes you happy. The next piece of advice, which kind of correlates, is being able to say no. Not even like, just like when people ask you like, hey, can you work on this project with me, or do you want to join this student org? Being able to say no to that because you just don't have the time or it's just not your interest is totally okay. I feel as people, we feel like, if we say no, we're going to make them feel bad. But it's really, I feel like we overestimate emphasize that impact. Also, be able to say no to yourself. I know going into this term, I personally had a huge list of things that I wanted to do. And I was like, okay, Claire, you got to choose 5 of these and you just got to focus on them. So I also had to say no to myself so I didn't overwhelm myself. The last piece of advice, which I think is kind of obvious, but we also ignore, is do what makes you happy. If you're not happy doing something, then why are you doing that? And I really think like as students, like trying to get internships, we try and do things that look good in our resume, but we don't actually like doing them. And I think that's just like wrong priorities. So for example, last summer, I really wanted to work at Home Depot. No reason, just I really wanted to. It doesn't look the best on my resume. It paid like way less than the internships that were being offered, but it was something that made me happy and I learned that so much from that experience and I loved it. And so I thought it was totally worth it because it made me happy. So now we're going to move into the more interactive portion of the presentation and I'm going to walk you through a couple questions that might help you realize your passions. Unfortunately, you guys can't unmic yourself, so you're going to have to use the chat. But please feel free to like interact with me, give me your ideas, because I really think like both myself and the other members could really like learn a lot from your opinions and your experiences. So next slide. So the first question is, what activities did you like as a child? I personally loved building forts, like not even just like the pillow forts with blankets, but I also loved using like random scraps of wood and metal that my dad had laying around. I'm from rural Oregon, so I had like plenty of outdoor space and plenty of nature to like just build random forts all the time. And I loved doing that as a kid. Like I just felt so free and it was just so much fun. So what are some things that you guys did as a child that just was like super fun and you loved to do it? Ah, Samir, you love drawing. Yes. I have like so many books from when I was a kid of just random drawings. It's super fun. I'm gonna like give it a couple of minutes because I know typing can take a while. Oh my gosh, it's so cute. Yes. I have so much stuffed animals still. Like, oh my gosh, that's so cute, Franny. Okay, if you guys want to keep typing and it will come up later, these questions will build on themselves, so it'll be good. So if you want to go to the next question, Camden. So what about this childhood activity made you happy? So part of like building forts that I loved was having this idea and then actually physically creating it and having an end product that like basically did what I wanted it to do. I loved having to like solve problems when it wasn't quite working. And a big thing for me was like I loved having friends over to build forts. Like it was way more fun doing it with people than just by myself. So think about like what part of the pageant shows with stuffed animals did you really like? What made you happy? Like Samir already said, like he loved being creative and the bright colors. Like, like what components made you guys love it so much? Like why did you like sports so much? Aw, these are great answers, guys. You're doing great. All right, if we want to go to the next question. So now think about your answers and how that connects to what you're doing now. So what current activities are you guys doing that connects to what you like? So my example, it's been a couple years now, but a couple years ago, I rebuilt an engine from scratch. And that was totally like something that like I had to create and I had to problem solve through. And it really had those aspects. And I loved working through the problems with my mentors. And it was just like really collaborative and fun. I also learned from that experience that gaining the knowledge and just learning throughout my project was really important to me. So also through like this new experience, like I reinforced my previous things that I loved, but I also found some new things that were really important to me. So what are some things that you guys currently do and like how does it connect? Yeah, Samir, graphic design would definitely help with being creative. So yeah, developing software and publishing it, like you could totally be competitive in that manner, or maybe like you can make some game aspect. Like you could totally connect these, and it's fantastic. I love it. You guys are being so interactive. I appreciate it. We can go on to the next question. So this is a really important question, and it also is for people who are like, I've changed a lot since I was a little kid. Like, what made me happy back then doesn't make me happy now. What currently elicits like a really strong emotional response from you guys? So, for example, because of COVID, my dining hall has gone fully to takeout, and seeing the mounds of styrofoam by the trash can just like causes me so much fury, and I get so enraged by it. And so from that, I'm like, okay, I am really passionate about the environment and recycling and like proper material use. And that's something that like gets me really passionate. So it can be any type of emotional response. It could be something that makes you really happy, really sad, excited, really pissed off. And this doesn't have to connect to your previous questions. It could be something completely different. Samir, I totally think the music totally connects to your creative side. Oh my gosh, we have some music fans. So maybe you guys are really into expression. I don't know. We could dig into these. We could get psychological. Homework. I'm assuming that's a negative emotion. Okay, so these are great answers, guys. So these questions were just kind of like to help get your brain working, to kind of start like help you think about things that you might be passionate in. So now like you've answered these types of questions, you can think about them more on your own. Totally, I would suggest like go out and look at problems or solutions or startups that exist around these subjects. Look for what's missing and like what you can create that would solve this problem, and kind of just like use these questions to give you a sense of direction to narrow down that Google search, or when you, if you're old fashioned, go to the library and do some research. Just like use these to narrow it down. So we can go to the next slide. So some common struggles that you might face when you're trying to pursue your passion. I'm going to go over 4 of them. There's definitely more, but these I feel like are the big ones. So the first one is financial barriers. So I think there's a couple ways you can go about this. So one is you can try and implement what you're passionate about into your job. If it's, so say Samir, you're really into like the creativeness and the art. So you can like totally implement that into like a graphic designs career, which I think could totally like you can pursue your passion and be financially stable. Another option is you do a job that you're not a fan of, but you can build up the money so you can pursue your passion. So for example, one of my friend's dads works at a dam. He's about to retire. He does not like it at all, but it gives him the financial stability, and he's been able to save enough. So now in retirement, he can go and he can travel the world and play music, which is his passion. So those are 2 options for trying to overcome financial barriers. Feeling like you have a lack of community or support. I know like when you come up with your passion, you might feel like really isolated and you don't think anyone like aligns with you. I guarantee someone is interested in something like yourself. So you can use social media as a tool to reach out. You can look up at groups on the internet to try and find people who are meeting. I know because of COVID, it's really hard to do group meetings and try to meet people that way, but hopefully because the vaccines are coming out soon, you can go out and you can try to meet some groups. You could try and get coffee with people, and you can try and just like socialize that way, and trying to find like places of common interest. The next problem is negative opinions. These can be both from peers and your family, and these can like really bring you down and just make you question your passion. And I just think you should just be really confident and persistent in your own passion. Just like just be sure of yourself. Like, this is something I like, and just try and disregard. I also know that from personal experience, like when I first came to Chicago, I was an avid recycler, but all of my friends are like, why do you recycle? That's so like so extra, so unnecessary. But I was super consistent and passionate about it. And by the end of the term, they were all like recycling nuts. Like they're like, what plastic can go where? Like, do we have to wash this out? Is this okay to recycle? So you can totally change those negative opinions if you stay confident. And that can totally like create your own community as well. So now I have like my own little community of like recycling people. So that's a piece of advice for that. The last problem is trying to stay motivated when facing challenges. So say you're really into something like a complex issue like AI, which is constantly changing, constantly improving. And it can be like really intimidating if you don't know anything about it, trying to learn about it. So I would suggest making like day or weekly little objectives and things to be satisfied about when you complete, because this will give you a sense of completion and make that giant task feel way easier. Also, trying to stay motivated over a long period of time can be really hard. So I would suggest taking a week or two break where you just take a mental break from your passion and just like relax. Like then you can come back and you can have a clear head and maybe like reinvigorate your excitement about the topic. Or this can be a time when you like reassess your passion. Like, is this something I'm still really passionate about? Do I need to kind of realign myself? So give yourself time again to like think and just take a break. Because even like if you love something, doing it constantly can be a little much, including, watching Netflix all the time. All right, we can go to the last slide. So I have 3 big takeaways that I want you guys to do. Your passion can be anything. So like if you have this really intense feeling or you really like leadership, don't disregard it because you don't think it can be a passion. It can be anything. The next part is give yourself time to think, especially as students. Like give yourself time to breathe. It's okay to not be doing a billion things all at once. It also might help you like find what you want to do, and that could give you a new sense of direction. And my last takeaway that I want you guys to have is do what makes you happy. Because at the end of the day, if you're doing what makes you happy, you're going to have a great life and it's going to be really good for you. So that's the end of my presentation. So we're going to move into Q&A, but I hope you guys enjoyed it.
Well done, Claire. Great stuff.
Thank
you. Awesome. Yeah. Claire, thank you very much. We're going to open the floor to some questions now. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat and we'll go ahead and get into that.
Yeah, Claire, I have to say that when you were reading out some of the, on the previous slides, some of the things that you face as an entrepreneur with an idea or a passion and how it's, reacted to by others is something entrepreneurs always have to face. And there's a whole process, I think, to how to go about doing that.
Totally.
Yeah.
You can like give more personal advice because you've been through it.
Yeah, it's funny when, I, as an entrepreneur, when I go into an office, corner office, a cubicle, a boardroom, and I say, I've got this idea, and it's interesting about how the mind works. The mind's like every other organ in the body. It doesn't like strangers, right? When something strange enters the body creates all these defenses on how to deal with some stranger. Ideas are the same way. And when you walk into these meetings with people and you say, I've got this idea, and you can start to see people's brains working, right? You start, going around and around and around, and you go, and someone's thinking about it, and they go, my concern with this idea, and I'm like, hold on a second. Okay, but before we get to that, what do you like about this idea? And they have not expended any brain energy whatsoever on what they like about the idea. And they go, well, I guess that you put me on the spot. I guess I kind of like this. And in fact, you know what? If we were to do that, we could also do these things. I'm like, okay, great. So a few minutes ago, you brought up some concerns and some challenges. Let's go back to those. And they go, well, now that I better understand the idea, I'm not so sure I have those concerns anymore. What I'm telling you is that good ideas are dying today. They're dying in corner offices and Zoom calls because we're so good at playing the devil's advocate. Now, that does not mean that every idea is a good idea, but good ideas are dying today because the human mind is so capable of playing the devil's advocate. But anyway, I guess we have some questions.
Awesome. Yeah. So, Claire, after you wrapped up your presentation, what is the number one thing? If anyone can take one thing away from your presentation, what would that be and why?
Oh, that's a big question. Well, I have three, so I need to narrow it down to one. I don't know. I think like just don't give up on your passion. Kind of like Paul just said it. Like just have that confidence and don't give up. Like you're gonna have these challenges. You're gonna have people who like don't believe in you, and just like believe in yourself and believe in your passion, which can be like really hard. But I feel like if you believe in yourself, it's gonna be infectious. And if you can like, I think what Paul just said was fantastic. Of like change that negative mindset to a positive mindset and like just share your confidence in that conversation. I think that'd be super important to take away from this.
Yeah, as an entrepreneur, I grew up in the surfing in the 70s, 80s. We didn't have internet, right? And we would go on these surf trips to Mexico for 2 weeks, and it would be flat. We'd take time off of work. We'd go on vacation. We'd go down there, and we'd be flat. And we'd be sitting down there going, we picked the wrong weeks. Well, that doesn't happen anymore. See, with the internet, you can get buoy readings and swell information as far south as New Zealand, and you just don't go on that trip because the technology says there's going to be no surf. So more recently, I had this friend of mine who was getting buoy readings about this swell that was coming into Los Angeles. And he comes in, this was late at night in his house, and he goes, look, this is where the waves are going to be the biggest tomorrow. It was north of Los Angeles in Oxnard. And so we get all excited. We wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and or 4 o'clock in the morning. We're driving through the dark. We get up to Oxnard. It's sun's coming up. And so what did the technology give us? It gave us exactly what it said. It was massive. And so I start to grab my surfboard and my wetsuit, and my friend says, what are you doing? I go, I'm going surfing. He goes, we're not going out there. Are you insane? I go, but that's what we talked about. We said we were going to do this. And was I scared? Oh yeah, I was really, really, really scared. But I went out completely by myself, started paddling out. I got thrown around like a rag doll and turned around and had the most incredible surf session of my life. The point I'm trying to make to students, to all of you, is what as students, as potential entrepreneurs, what are you going to do if the technology gives you exactly what you're trying to do, right? Will you paddle out? Will you paddle? Because you can't ride waves sitting on the beach. You actually have to paddle out. And entrepreneurs will get thrown around like rag dolls because that's how it works. But the fact is you can't ride waves sitting on the beach. So you actually have to paddle out. And so I would say as an entrepreneur, it's not all fun and games out there. People get hurt, in entrepreneurship, in surfing big waves, but you can't ride waves sitting on the beach. So I would encourage you to address those fears and jump in and paddle out. And I hope as an entrepreneur, you'll have the same experience that I've had, which is an incredible opportunity building businesses, but it's at times very scary. So anyway, it's confronting those fears and paddling out.
Awesome. And Paul, building off of that, would you say that an entrepreneur can truly be successful if they're not really passionate about what they're doing?
Oh, there's no chance. If you're not passionate about what you're doing, you have no chance at being a successful entrepreneur. Think about it, Camden, and think about it, Claire. I would think you're probably studying in school what it is you're passionate about, right? I mean, if I remember when I was going, I went to school at UCLA out west, and so I wanted it because wanted to prepare to go to grad school. I wanted to have good grades. Well, to have good grades, you got to study things you're passionate about. And so having a career is not any different. It's the same thing. And here's the other thing too. You can't lie to yourself. If you don't enjoy it, there's no chance you can be successful at it. And you can't do it for a long enough period of time, enough years to actually master it and be good at it, because deep down, you don't love it. And so to that point, Camden, I've always done what I loved most. It was my own personal passion to clean up Santa Monica Bay. I was sick of getting sick, and I was sick of my friends getting sick. And so my reason for becoming an entrepreneur was personal. And so I was passionate about it. When I saw those projects, those really amazing projects that could really improve people's lives and communities stuck, I was like, oh, come on, we got to figure out a way to bring money to these projects and get them off the shelf and into the community. I was passionate about, I wanted to see those projects happen. I wanted to see those people's lives improved. And if that's not what's driving you, no chance that you can be a successful entrepreneur. So I would say, just like in school, choose a career that brings you joy. And this is really what Claire is saying. Choose a career that brings you joy. And if that, and by the way, that's success. I don't care what the position pays you. In the end, if it brings you joy, that is success. Monetary success is something altogether different, and that's up to certain people to decide what kind of monetary or life they want to achieve. But I can tell you there are a lot of very, very successful people that are not happy. So I would say, just like in school, select a career that you're really good at and you're really passionate about and brings you joy.
Paul, I loved how excited you got when you started to talk about your passion. Like, you could totally, like, even from my perspective, like, I knew, I was like, oh, he's into this.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Claire, you don't do it for 33 years if it doesn't bring you joy, and it brings me joy. Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. And if anyone has any other questions, we still have a bit of time, so feel free to ask. Give it another couple minutes for you guys.
Yeah, I noticed one of the comments was on technology and programming, coding. Yeah, GiveWith is a social impact technology company, and what we do is we use technology to help companies grow by making it easy to embed social impact into commerce. And so I think these are really exciting times in terms of how technology can be leveraged to solve problems or approach problems in ways that have never been approached before. And so I think as young people today, the power of technology to bring new ways to solve very old challenges, is exciting. And I think about, I always say to young entrepreneurs when they say to me, I got this idea. I'm like, can we do it forever? They're like, forever? I'm like, yeah, would we want to do it forever? And if we wouldn't want to do it forever, go back to the drawing board and keep tweaking, keep designing. And so what I mean by that is, like, let's just take, like, if someone came up to you right now with the idea of the fossil, this is to you, Claire, as an environmentalist. If someone said, I got an idea, let's just pretend it's a new idea, but we all know it's been going on since cavemen. But the idea that if someone said, I got an idea, we're going to create energy by burning everything that was once alive, what used to be old forests, and we're going to rip the tops off of mountains, and we're going to suck the coal out, and we're going to burn it, and we're going to burn everything that was once alive. Can we do that forever? No. You're like, you can do that for a while, but we have been doing that. We have been burning everything that was once alive since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution over such a short period of time. We've put the planet at a place of crisis. This is a business model that you certainly cannot do forever. And so when I look at my own businesses and I say, could we, in the case of advertising, leverage the advertising spends of big advertisers, from broadcasters to advertisers, as an agent for positive social change forever? Yeah, I should hope, though, that we'll leverage conversations between brands and consumers and media companies and viewers forever to improve people's lives. In my first business, can we remove pollutants that would otherwise end up in Santa Monica Bay or in any river, lake, stream, or bay during a rain event by removing it before it rains? I hope we'll do that forever. So I hold myself to those standards, and I hope as entrepreneurs, you'll think about things that one, solve problems in new approaches, and not create a business that you can't do forever, that will cause more harm than it will ever, do, in a positive way. And so I would just say, the one thing about being a social entrepreneur is it's a blessing and a curse. I mean, Claire, this is to your point, the passion. The blessing is that you find it immensely gratifying. The curse is you can never shut it off. You're always looking and you're seeing challenges, and you're seeing, challenges that communities face that need to be solved. And as much as I'd like to shut it off, I can't. And that's why I'm sitting here 33 years later, still trying to figure out new ways to solve old problems. And so that's the blessing and the curse of being a serial social entrepreneur. Is that it's immensely gratifying, but you can't shut it off.
So it doesn't really look like we have any other questions. So again, Claire, Paul, thank you so much for taking your time to speak here. Super great hearing what both of you had to say. And for the audience, in a little bit, we're going to encourage you to head over to the sponsor showcase. We're going to briefly announce it on the main stage, then open up our expo area where each sponsor will host their very own booth. Make sure to head there. Again, thank you all for coming. Claire, Paul, great seeing you guys.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Be well, everyone. Take care.
Thanks for
Have a great one,
coming.
guys.
Bye.
Hope you guys learned something.